Okay, so if you're anything like me, you've probably been scrolling Instagram and you've definitely come across this kind of UI style animation. The reason it's so popular is because of how minimalistic it looks, and it looks premium, and that catches the viewer's eyes. Today I'm actually going to show you how I created this remake of Wynevisuals Instagram Reel. So without any more yapping, let's go straight into After Effects and get this done. So we're here in After Effects, and if you'd noticed, the video format was actually 1:1. So we're gonna go with 1080 by 1080p for this edit, and we'll call it anything like Wine Visual Remake, and change the composition time to about 20 seconds. One thing that always helps when you're doing a remake, just for practice, is you can always have it open on another actually desktop or computer. Like I've got it on a laptop, but if you don't have access to another laptop, it doesn't really matter. You can always switch between Windows on PC. It just saves a bit of time and effort when you have two devices. So first of all, we're going to start with just creating a white background. We can name it background. And what you'll notice is oftentimes the backgrounds that you see on these reels are faded out or not fully white. So there's a couple of things we can do to achieve that effect. One thing that we can do is add a vignette and just make it soft. So maybe 20 for the amount, or even 30. Another thing we can do is add a gradient ramp and just set the point to far outside the corners and go just under white for this one and keep the other one at white. The first step to recreating this would be noticing how the Gmail logo comes in and kind of wobbles around when we see it come in, and the Google workspace kind of fades in with the typewriter effect. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So we go back to After Effects and we're just going to download the Gmail logo. So what some people don't actually realize is that a lot of these icons, especially the ones from Apple, are actually copyrighted. So just for this tutorial, I'm going to grab any random one off the internet. But when you're doing your editing, so for example, I've got a description for flat icon, and you probably have to do something similar, because otherwise, once your edits do start to take off, you can get copyright claimed, and it's just not worth the small fee that you pay for the icon subscription. So we've imported the Gmail icon into the project, and we're just gonna toggle motion blur and 3D for this one, because it always is good to have motion blur in your. And if you'll notice, the scale as well as the rotation and position all had a change in amount in this edit. So we're gonna keyframe the scale, the position, and the Z rotation. It's not often that you'll have to change the X and Y rotation, because most of the stuff is done on like a 2D plane. So the Z rotation is most likely the one that you'll be changing most of the time. So we're just going to go ahead a few frames, maybe half a second, and keyframe again for everything, because this is the final result that we want to have. After that, it's just going to shake by itself, and the scale is going to shake by itself. I'll show you what I mean in a second. The scale to 0, the rotation to around the rotation to around 27, and the position just a little bit lower than the original. Now what you'll see is it's not smooth at all, and that's because we haven't added the bounce effect, which is what you'll see everyone uses, and it creates a really cool up and down effect. So I'll show you what I mean. If you don't have this plugin, it's a free plugin, and you can find it anywhere on, if you just search up bouncer. I'm going to select every single keyframe and click bounce. We'll play it back just to see how it looks. Already way better, right? It's quite a slow transition, so we're going to actually bring the keyframes in quite a bit closer and play that. Yeah, way better. Way better. And what you can do is you can play with these values over here. You can change this to a little bit less, maybe 40. And then the frequency, you can change it to maybe 3. And then the decay, 6. So what the amplitude is it's quite self-explanatory actually. It's how much the maximum movement will be. And the frequency is how often it's going to happen. So how quick the thing goes up and down. And the decay is how long the actual overall animation goes for. So 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, etc. The longer you extend it, the less of the effect it's going to actually be. So if we look at it now, the next part would actually be the bar. After Effects, we're going to use the pen tool and create a bar just like this. And with the stroke, with the fill off, we're going to create the stroke just a nice light red. And you see the anchor point is over here. So a quick shortcut to make it into the center is Control-Alt-Home. And it puts it into the center, which is just a nice thing to have. So if you notice, the movement was actually in line with the Gmail logo. So we're just going to go over here to where the movement stops and link this line to the Gmail logo so we don't have to do the movement all over again. And now if you go back, you'll see it actually follows the Gmail logo, which is actually pretty nice. For the increase of the bar, we're actually going to use a trim path. Click Add and Trim Path. Open it up. Go End and go to where you want it to end. So where it's actually a full line. You might go here, for example, and go to the start. And because it had already started at around 50, we'll just change it to 50. And just like that. So to get a more smooth animation, you just select all the keyframes, F9, and go into the bar, and then select all, and then drag this back. Now for the text part, we're actually going to use an effect that is already built into After Effects called Typewriter. Type Google Workspace, again centering the anchor point and bringing it here, and change the color to black. Now for the typewriter effect, just go in Effects and write Typewriter and bring it back to a reasonable point and click F9. See how that's a bit fast for our liking? We can actually bring it further. See how it looks now. Now for this little jump effect, we're actually going to use null objects for that. So go back to the After Effects and create a layer new null. And because everything is attached to the Gmail logo, we can actually just attach the logo just to the null without changing anything else. Make the null 3D. Now when we want it to go up, we keyframe the position around here and go up a little bit. And make sure to easy ease these, just using the method that I described earlier. Wash that back. Yep. And now for the down effect, you want to make sure to use a new null because this one has already got its keyframe up to here and you want the movement to start before that point. And then around midpoint, you want to click on the keyframe and then go just past this one and then go down. And we'll see how that looks. Adjust the keyframes like this and we'll see how that looks. Good, so we've done the first part. Now we'll move on to the second part, which is arguably harder. So the next part is this little animation where these texts show up and you get a little blue bar that enters the screen. So for this animation, we're actually going to cut it where it gets its peak movement. So we're actually going to go into the graph, and around here at the peak, we want to cut out everything else. And then for this next part, we're actually going to have to create every element one by one. So for the sake of the tutorial, I've just used any icons that I've found online, but for your edits, please try and use icons that you actually get and pay for, because otherwise you can get in copyright trouble. So I've left the starred one blank because I want to show you something that not many people know, but if you use the star tool and you actually go under contents, polystar, and the path, you can actually choose how many points you want. So if, say for example, you wanted to make a triangle and you just click 3, it actually creates a triangle. So just something I thought I'd show you, and we'll get back into the edit. So to create the little bar, you've actually just got to use the rounded rectangle tool. So we're just going to create a bar here, and the fill can be just a light blue, so around something like that, and push it under all the other layers. Cool. And we want to make sure it doesn't have a stroke, so we just go here and disable the stroke. To achieve the effect that Wine has done, you can actually just decrease the opacity, so something like 50. For the roundness, you can actually increase that by going under the contents, under rectangle path, and increasing the roundness to something like that. So for this tutorial, I actually tried avoiding using a camera, so we're going to use another null here. Do the same thing, just make it 3D, and we're going to attach everything to this null. So we want it to come down, so we're actually going to keyframe the position around here where we want it to end, and then go back to where the Gmail logo is still in, create another keyframe, and push it up. And if we play this back, yep. Now all we've got to do is add a slight rotation and a little bit of bounce. So we're going to actually keyframe R, again Z rotation, go to the final keyframe, let it be 0, and we'll come here and we'll change it to something slight, like -6 for example. Now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier, select all and click bounce it, and we'll just see. Yep, so that looks good. And to make the effect even better, we can move the keyframe forward so that it looks like it comes in straight after the Gmail. If you notice how there's a lot of bounce, we can actually decrease that by decreasing the amplitude and increasing the duration, so increasing the decay. He's actually gone and changed every single text and layer individually with a little bit of extra bounce. So just using the same time frame of the keyframes, we're just gonna toggle rotation for each layer, rotation, and keyframe the Z rotation. And for this part, you can do anything because you want them all to look different. Otherwise, they're all gonna look in unison. And you only want to change them slightly, so we're just gonna change these a little bit. Now, before we look at it, we're just gonna select everything and add a bounce to it. And the annoying thing is you can't actually select everything and click bounce because between different layers you can't actually do that, so we'll have to do that individually. You'll notice there's not that much of an effect here, but that's probably because we haven't adjusted the keyframes right. So we're going to drag the keyframes a little bit further forward. Yeah, you can definitely see that there's a little bit of difference between the shakes, and it creates quite a cool effect that you'll see in all of everyone's edits. So looking at the edit, you'll see that the camera slowly zooms in and the blue bar goes up. So for that, we're actually going to create a camera, and the default settings are usually fine. We're going to create a new null, select 3D and pick whip the camera to the null. Here, when the animation is just starting, we keyframe, and then a few seconds of a slow linear zoom should be good. And for the bar to go up, it's quite simple as you'd imagine. You just keyframe the position, a second up, maybe go up, add another keyframe, a few seconds just to hold it there, and then up again. See how that looks? Yep, so now we just want to use F9 and create a more smooth effect for the keyframes, dragging these out closer to the middle. Now if we play it back, yeah, we've got that sharp up look that we were trying to achieve. Next, you'll see the cursor kind of fly through the screen. That's obviously quite an easy effect. You just import your cursor, just change the rotation to something that you like, increase the scale quite a lot. If you do have it, you can use Shadow Studio, and we'll just change the opacity master to something like 25. Now for the transition, you want to go close to where the keyframe stops and the camera would stop zooming in, and click on a keyframe position. Bring the cursor down a little bit, and when you think it's right, bring it across the screen. So now we'll play it back. So as you'll notice, it's way too slow and the keyframe starts way too early, so we're just going to change that. Looking at it again, you might even want to increase the scale even larger so that none of the screen is visible when you don't want it to be. And you'll notice the finger starts creeping into the screen. You just want to change the position back even lower. And now if we play it back, I think it looks pretty good. Yep. So go to the point where you can't see anything on the screen and cut everything out. Cut out everything except for the nulls. You'll see that the emails sort of fade in. And again, there's individual bounce. So for this, we can't actually use a null object to quantify all of them because they're all moving in at a different time and rotation. So we'll actually have to do this one manually. So we'll just create one and then copy and paste the others. So this is where you'll recognize that the background isn't actually white because the email is fully white. And now if we create a box, it's quite distinctly different. Add all of the writing in a little box using the square tool. Make sure that the stroke is the same as the star. And a cool trick to make sure that the square is a perfect square is when you're creating it, instead of going all over the place, if you hold shift, it will become a perfect square automatically. So select all of them except the last one and pick whip to the back square layer. So whenever we change the back layer, everything else moves. So we'll just do the first one. Keyframe the position not too far after, as well as the Z rotation, and bring it towards the start of the transition. Decrease the Y value, change the rotation. And now if you use the bounce effect, it should look decent. Bring it even closer together. And you actually want it to start when the mouse cursor moves just into the middle and just past halfway around here. And we need to make sure that the mouse cursor is actually above these layers. There we just bring the cursor above. Now we're actually going to change the opacity so that it fades in other than just by how it looks right now. So select all of the layers, go to where you want it to fade in, and opacity, so T for opacity. Click 0, go a little bit further around here, and you want to go to 100. We'll see how that looks. Yep, so as the next ones come in, you'll start to see a fade. So we're just going to duplicate these a couple of times. Select every layer and Control D. Bring it above. And the position, because we haven't changed the position keyframe yet. And now to bring everything down, because we've pick whipped everything to the back shape layer, we can just select these two keyframes and bring everything down just like that. So now for the build-up effect, we kind of want to select every single layer that we've just duplicated and move it across a few frames just so it creates a come-in effect. Yep, I think that looks good. Now we just do this a couple more times for the next ones. And we've got that fade-in effect. I'm not going to worry too much about the primary and promotion part because it's all the same thing. So we're going to move to the next part, which is a slow zoom in and the cursor moving across the screen. We're going to go back to the null that we created with the camera, go layer new null, make it 3D and pick up the previous null to it. Just as the frame starts, we're going to keyframe the position and zoom in slightly. Just a linear progression is fine, so we don't actually have to change the keyframes on this one. Probably just bring out the keyframe a little bit wider, so even here. And now we're going to import our cursor again. This one actually has to be 3D because of the effect that we're going to use with the camera moving in. So cut it in using Ctrl-Shift-D around here. And decrease the scale. Looking back, I realize it's probably more of a less linear F9, go into the graph. And for this slowly fading out look, we're going to bring this keyframe a little bit closer to the start and this one a little bit closer to the center. Yep, so for this animation, we're actually going to drag this keyframe out even further. And if you take a look, this animation actually goes from being a little bit further to instantly going forward with a little bit of a blur in between. So I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So we go to the null, new null, and again, just do the same thing as usual. Halfway through the animation, you want to click position and go one frame forward and change the scale lower. And of course, the position to where you want it. And an important thing to do here is select both of these first keyframes, right click, and toggle hold keyframe. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess and it won't really look the best. So just do that for now. Yep, now I've got this little instant zoom in effect, which is really cool. And for the blur, we're just going to use a casual adjustment layer, layer new adjustment layer. You can use any blur, but I usually use the lens blur, and the default one is just fine. We're going to keyframe the radius to where the transition actually occurs. So around here. So around here, we're going to bring the keyframe. 0 radius. We're going to go one frame ahead. Change the radius to around 10. And then a few frames out, go back to 0. Yeah, so a dizzy move-in effect, which I think looks pretty cool. And we're just going to follow the cursor, so create a new null. And this is just going to follow the path of the cursor. We're going to keyframe it here. And then go to where you think the cursor stops. And move in line with the cursor. Using the graph, we're going to use this kind of graph. Because as the same as the cursor, it goes slower at the end. Yep, I think that looks pretty cool. So the next part is another smooth camera movement into another scene. And this compose text shows up and another cursor joins it. So add a new null to that null and keyframe the position this way. So that kind of follows the path of the original movement. This is going to be a middle graph. Yep, that looks pretty cool. Now this next part's quite easy. It's just a small fade in of a blue box with text and a logo. So we're going to create a new box about this size. I think the roundness is already good. Make it 3D and turn on motion blur. Center the anchor point, turn off the stroke, and change the fill to a light blue. Then we're just going to decrease the opacity to something like 40. Now we'll just play it back to see how it comes in. Yeah, I think it can even be smaller. And we'll keyframe the opacity so that it comes in. Just over here, and then maybe to here. It might be 0. Yep, so that looks pretty good. Adding the text, add a pin logo or whatever, just making sure that it's 3D and motion blurs on. Now we're just going to do the same thing for the cursor, bring it in with a little bit of rotation. So you go to a point where you think is right, and you keyframe the position and the rotation, obviously keeping the cursor outside of range. When you think it should come in, maybe like a second or two later, you bring it up, you just drag it up. We're going to select all the keyframes, F9, and using the same in exit graph, we're just going to do that. One thing I've forgotten to do this whole time is centering everything in the center so that it actually looks like it's more of a central appeal to the audience. And you can always align your stuff by going here and clicking proportional grid. And this center, you just want to make sure the center of your anchor point is always in line with that, which I haven't done this time, but I always do in my edits. So make sure you're doing this. Now you'll notice when the cursor actually toggles onto the background switch, in his edit it kind of lights up and goes a little bit bigger with a little bit of shadow. So what we're going to do is just duplicate this. The bottom one, we're actually going to make it black. The opacity keyframes over so that it only lights up when the cursor touches it. And for the opacity, you don't want it too much. Something like 10 is good. And make sure that the stroke is the only thing visible. Now you'll see that when it hovers over the button, there's a slight black ring around it. So basically the next part is the cursor getting smaller and the blue background goes a little bit bigger and changes into this little email. Keyframe the scale of the cursor and then go a couple of frames forward and make it a little bit smaller. Now the text and the pen actually does disappear, so we're just going to have to keyframe the opacity for that. Go a couple of frames forward and change it to 0. Go a few frames forward and make it a little bit larger. You just have to copy and paste the keyframes onto the back layer. Now this little email scene is basically just writing and basic shapes along with icons, so I'll let you guys do that on by yourselves, and then we'll just go to the next scene, which is the Gmail logo zooming out, and then the Gmail text comes out from behind it. So just using the same blue shape, we're gonna decrease the size into how to make it a little bit smaller for the Gmail logo. We also got to mimic the camera movements, so slow zoom out using a null object. So you want the size to decrease at the same time as the zoom out. And for the color change, we're actually going to use an effect called fill. So just add fill to the layer and copy the fill from up here, the number, and paste it onto the fill effect. Keyframe the color and then go a little bit forward and change it to a lighter shade of dark gray. That's about good. Add the Gmail logo and make it 3D and cut it whenever you feel is right. Make sure it gets a bit smaller too, or else it just looks a bit weird if the back square is getting smaller by itself. For text to appear from behind, just link the Gmail logo to the back and keyframe the position of the back layer. Go a few frames forward and move it to the left. The text, write Gmail, and just adjust the keyframes so that the Gmail comes out to the right. And if you guys want the assets, just comment in the comment section and I'll create a Discord and start putting all the assets on there. But that's all for today's tutorial.